Okay. Ooh.
Hey, Stefan, how's it going?
Hello, Michael. I have literally just started the actual broadcast side of things, so to make sure that anybody who wanted to jump in can jump in. How are you?
Yeah, I'm all right. Yeah, not too bad. How are you?
Yeah, pretty good. A little bit early in the morning for me. Don't like early mornings normally, but that's fine.
Yeah, it's always. What time is it
then? 4 minutes to 7. Which, I
okay.
know it's not that early, but
No, it's early enough. I got my maths wrong.
Actually, I just need to grab one thing. One sec. Yes, a lot of people get maths wrong. I actually got a ping from somebody on Skype. Like I wake up to see a ping from somebody on Skype in Edinburgh saying, "Oh, Stefan, are you there? I've got a quick question for you." And it's like, dude, it's 3 a.m. And it happens all the time. People are just kind of like, sending me emails going, "Oh, look, I need a reply to this in an hour." And it's like, then don't send it at 4 a.m. in the morning.
Sure. I occasionally get that. I think people who work with me now more and more figured out where I am and not to do that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or they won't get a response. And when you phone on silent helps a lot as well.
Mm. No. Yeah, I monitor the YouTube, and if there's any questions that come up in the YouTube that are relevant, I will pass them into the conversation. And hello, Gavin.
Hey guys, how you doing?
Hey Gavin, how's it going?
Linda as well. Although she's
Linda.
Doesn't have a mic on at the moment. She might still be setting up.
No, that's all right.
So yeah, we have a couple of people. Gavin, just letting you know, I have actually switched on the YouTube side of things, so it's being archived right from now. We have a couple of people in there watching, and I've let them know that if anybody has any questions, that they can just put them into the chat there, and I will pass them into our conversation.
Stefan, can you hear me okay?
Yes. Hello, Linda.
Hi, how are you doing?
Good.
Good.
Great to have you with us.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
No, anytime and all the time. In fact, look, it wasn't really an invitation, more like a please be here.
Understood. So is there a sense of how many people are going to join?
Look, there probably won't be that many. I'm just got a ping from Scott's cell phone, so I'm about to send him a look, this is an interesting thing. What we've found with this is when I put up across the various different Facebook groups, and like literally there's probably 6 to 8 different Facebook groups, from the spatial audio people to the narrative storytelling people to game audio people to a VR for audio group to the AES audio group. So there's lots of very, very significant Facebook groups that I send the invitation out to. And every time we've done this, we get this response from lots and lots of people going, "Oh, that's awesome. This is great. We're so glad you're doing that. Can't wait to be there." And then there's like 4 of us here and 2-3 people watching on YouTube. And it is a really interesting thing that, and this has happened in the past, where you say, "Yeah, we're thinking about doing this thing where we can discuss this." And everybody's like, "Oh, yes, we should have had that for ages, and this is really important. And make sure you cover X, Y, and Z." And then on the day, you've got 4 people there. And it's very, very common to have that sort of response. So we do what we can.
Nuno Fonseca emailed me a few minutes ago, Stefan, saying he wanted the link. So I think he might be trying to get in as well.
I emailed you the link. If you want to pass that on to him, please.
I did, yeah. I passed it on, so just in case you see him coming in.
Yeah. So the reason why I do it, just to explain, the reason why I do it in this way, and this is actually on the record for the YouTube as well. The system's actually very, very good because it allows a live broadcast with a slightly delayed stream, but also that stream is archived. So we have a permanent version of this on YouTube if people want to watch it later on. So that's great. However, the limitations of Google Hangout is that we can only have 10 people. Now, we've never had that fill up, but I would put money on the fact that if I shared this link publicly on Facebook, we would have all these people jump into the Google Hangout, which would mean that you guys wouldn't be able to jump in. And so I kind of need to reserve the Google Hangout for at least the people who we want central to the main discussion to, I guess, lead it. But I mean, last time we had, I don't know, about a dozen people in the YouTube thing following, and I shared the link there and said, hey, come and join us in the Google Hangout Live. But also what you do get is you often get people who are far more comfortable lurking. They just want to know what's going on. They want to sit in the background. They don't want to actually be involved. And that's totally fine. So I have no problem with that. But I do like to basically share the link in YouTube once it gets to a certain point, so that everybody can get in. But it allows us to control it a little bit. And here we have Mr. Scott Self on.
Hello.
Wonderful to see you, Scott.
Anyone who wants it, really, if someone wants to participate, it's open to anyone who wants to participate. It gives you the chance to moderate, make sure we share the links out evenly, I guess.
That is exactly the point. I am happy for absolutely anybody anywhere on the planet to be in on the Google Hangout. It's just that generally, as I said, there's sort of at the very least a core group of people who tend to be the ones who are a little bit more active, and this is more the point. If somebody's just going to lurk, as I said, that's completely fine. Then it's probably great for them to lurk from the YouTube. They can still ask any questions they have, but it's people who are going to be actively involved and directly ask questions and actually want to voice things there and then that are probably more beneficial to having the live part of it of the Google Hangout. But I will now share the thing into the YouTube one because there's a couple of people there. And Gavin, if you want to introduce us and sort of technically start us off, please feel free to.
Yeah. So, well, welcome everybody. This is, I guess, formally a New Realities meeting, and the New Realities group is a subgroup of the Technical Committee on Audio for Games, which, of course, Michael is chair of, and I'm vice chair. And to give a bit of context on what's been going on with this stuff. So over the last few months, we've decided that we really want to try and consolidate all of the expertise and information and knowledge in the audio community on audio for VR and AR and XR into one place. And a good starting point for that is to develop a wiki. And we've had quite a lot of conversations about this, and when we started the development of it. But one of the big things, of course, is the terminology of all of this, and that's kind of the meeting that we wanted to touch on today. Was really okay. Before we start, talking anything about standards or approaches to workflows and all of this, stuff that people really want to get in on. We need to talk about the terminology and what we're actually calling things and what actually the formal definitions of things that we want to put down. Because as I think in the last meeting, Stefan rightly pointed out, there was, several different definitions for particular terms that just end up confusing people. And we want to, I guess, shine a bit of light on all of this and to kind of help the confusion or remove the confusion. And so one way that we thought about doing this was, we could have like a glossary of terms within this wiki that people could go to, but that they could be like they could have certain levels of definition, so that you could say, okay, here's interaural level difference. This is a very well-defined term. But then something that is immersive is not such a well-defined term for some people, or I think there was a good example of one last week, which was spatial computing. What is that? It's a fairly proprietary term, and so perhaps that's something that we should be, noting down that this is not something that's commonly used in the industry yet. So that's kind of where we're at with this conversation here today, is what we want to do with terminology and how we want to approach it, and that's where you guys come in, and let's see if we can get a discussion going around it.
Yeah, I might just jump in quickly and just sort of give a few points on that, and then sort of open it up. And it's really funny, Gavin. Your introduction was perfect for that, because you said interaural level difference, and I'm like, interaural level difference, and I had to open my book up, because in my book I've called it interaural loudness difference, and so bam, they're right over that you know, ILD. And I think all of those, ITD and ILD and IPD, I think there's like 2 or 3 different definitions.
IID as well.
Yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
but there are different. The IID, I think there's 2 or 3 different ways that people call the I, what the I means, etc., etc. And I mean, the killer one is not so much that. I think those ones are reasonable. They can be slightly confusing to a real newcomer, but they're reasonable. The proprietary ones are a bit of a killer, and we can't stop that. If Magic Leap want to use spatial computing, they're going to use it. We can't stop them doing it, because they're wanting to differentiate. And Dolby will do the same thing, and Sony will do the same thing, and Microsoft will do the same thing, and Oculus will do the same thing. And they're marketing terms that I think the best approach to those is not to try and fight them in any way, but to, on the wiki, basically just go, hey, here's this thing that we're calling X. Oh, and just letting you know that Sony used this term and it's pretty much the same thing, and Microsoft used this term for pretty much the same thing, etc. So those ones we can note. It's ones like 3D audio, which you're like, what do you even mean? And it's generally, and again, I think this is relevant. It'll quite often be something that'll be used by not a what I'll term a big mover and shaker. When Sony decide they're going to use term X, the world kind of just has to suck that down, because Sony are big enough that they can influence language, and we have to sort of acknowledge that. But when you kind of have small company Y and very small company Z and very, very small company QQ that start to throw around terms, and in a lot of cases, it's not necessarily that they want a marketing term. In some cases, they've just kind of gotten it wrong. Like I've seen, you know, various sort of microphone and headphone companies say, yes, and we have 3D sound. And I'm like, but you're not defining what you mean by that. You literally are just throwing it out there. When a Microsoft or a Sony use a term like that, they will define it to some degree and say, we mean X. That's great. We can take that. We can slot it into where we want to say things. But when a smaller company just sort of throws it out there as some wonderful catchphrase, what we need to do is we need to say, well, but what does 3D sound even mean? And in those sorts of cases, I think we do need to combat it a little bit, because it can be, I think it can be sort of harmful to the overall message when people are just throwing in sounds. They're just throwing in words.
Oh, sorry. Hanging up.
I think there's probably 2 ways we want to look at this. One is that it's kind of a bit like standards. It's something within the AAS we think about when you're trying to put together a standard. I think the best standards are the ones that almost write themselves. What you're really doing is standardizing a workflow or a technology that people are already adopting. And I think terminology is very similar. It might be that I'll steal your examples, Magic Leap or Sony or Microsoft, throw out a term, and it might be technically inaccurate, it might be wrong, but if that's the term that sticks and everyone else adopts, that's fine. So I think there's probably 2 aspects that we probably want to address here. One is capturing accepted terminology, or some edge cases if they're introduced by a particular proprietary company for educational purposes, so that people entering the world of VR, new reality, there's a term we invented, extended reality, whatever, then I think there's people want to understand those terms and what they mean or what they're perceived to mean. So that's one thing. And I think another probably important one from an AAS perspective is that if we do move on to defining white papers and standards and documentation and recommended workflows, it's probably really important we're consistent amongst ourselves about the terminology we use. So I think that's, in my mind, that's probably the most important focus, that we are very consistent ourselves. But of course, we don't want to do the proprietary thing, just invent some terms just for the sake of it looking good in the standard. So I think it's the balance between the 2. I think probably reporting adoption, but also trying to be accurate where we can, and most importantly, meaningful. So I think those would be the objectives.
Agreed.
I think there's some basic, textbook terms that everybody can agree on. That and I believe, Gavin, that you've already got this kicked off within the wiki, if I'm correct. So
yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So I see the vocabulary of all of this to be kind of evolving, because what's going to happen is, as companies create and those creations become kind of the adopted standard that everybody uses, then whatever language that manufacturer uses suddenly moves into the day-to-day vernacular of 3D audio. So I view the wiki as going to be very much a living document, and the language that all of us create is going to become very much a living document. I mean, much like the word Google is now a verb. I'm gonna go out and Google that, and that word never existed until Google became Google. So, and why do we say I'm gonna Google as opposed to I'm gonna Yahoo? Well, because Google became the leader and everybody adopted that, and it became part of the language. So I see, what the manufacturers are coming out with, though it might be proprietary now, as the race goes on and we see who kind of bubbles to the top and stays there, that language is going to be added to. So, but I think, Gavin, you had, I believe, Sally helping you create that wiki. And then I think all of us really need to dedicate some time to that and see, just to review what's there and what we can add to it that is already very much in use today. And it shouldn't be just the advanced terms. It should include a lot of terms that people that are just now getting into the sphere of audio might not have been exposed to yet. Like, I know what ILD and ITD is, but that doesn't mean that the next person, a young person coming out of school that wants to get into 3D or VR audio will necessarily know that. So I think there's not a possibility of having too many words in the dictionary, so to speak.
The other thing is, and that's a really great point, Linda. And in fact, I've had sitting on my to-do list for the last 2 weeks, put something into the wiki. But then I kind of thought I wanted this meeting to happen first, just to sort of make sure that we were all on the same page. But also, I guess, one of the things I think, I personally need to get over is a bit of a fear with the wiki. And I love your term of living document, because one of the other reasons why I haven't put anything in is like, oh, but what if I put it in wrong? And it doesn't matter. Like, as long as if I have that sort of, I guess, fear, then I'm never going to put anything in. But I can certainly start. I mean, sitting right in front of me now, I've just opened my book up and I've got all the IID and ILD and IPD, and I literally can just take it basically word for word out of my book and put it straight in there, because I've checked all those definitions, and start populating with the ones that we know are accepted, we know that we agree on, et cetera, et cetera. And as you say, they could be very, very helpful to a beginner, and just start to go from there. But the living document thing is really important, because it means if I do put something in that's not necessarily wrong, but that perhaps is missing some information, somebody else can come in and just brush it up and update it.
Right.
Yeah, I would totally encourage you to do that, Stefan. Like, literally, I mean, if you're okay with that, cut and paste your glossary or whatever you've got at the back of the book and just throw it in, and then it's something that's tangible that we can all go to and say, okay, yeah, we can debate certain definitions, we can go through it, and we can say, okay, this is something that's a consensus amongst the industry, or this is something that actually has evolved since you've written the book. I think that's a starting point, and yeah, go for it if you can.
Gavin, I have a question just about the mechanics of the wiki. So if people want to add words to it, I take it that there's a edit function that makes that easy to do. But is there a space where, let's say somebody wants to add a term, but a group of us or a group of folks feel that the term needs to be better defined, or maybe should not be in the wiki at all? Is there a place, like a meet spot, where people can put their comments or editorial for that? You'll have to excuse my ignorance.
No, that's okay. No, it's absolutely fine. Thanks, Linda. I mean, it's literally just a skeleton framework right now, so we haven't even got to that level yet. But one of the things that I do know is that within this group, that there is the AES forum that we can go to, and we can debate these things as we wish. So That's really a tool that actually we should be using a lot more for this stuff.
Couldn't we almost do that on the wiki though? I mean, again, having the wiki and then having a forum, then having another bit, and then having a chat channel means that people can potentially miss out. I mean, couldn't we? And I know this is not necessarily how a wiki functions, but couldn't we have a page in the wiki and we literally call it, I don't know, the floating page or whatever, and somebody goes, yeah, look, I heard this term 3D sound, you know, and so they basically put 3D sound on this page, and the floating page is one where literally people can put in a definition and somebody else can shuffle around the definition and somebody else can, and then after a point in time, it settles down and we go, okay, seems like everybody's happy with that, and it goes off the floating page of the wiki into, I mean, to make the wiki, I mean, I love Linda's term of it being a living document, and it should be that. And I think if we do that, if we have a, whatever it is, a staging page with the wiki that's almost a discussion page within the wiki, it means everything stays within the wiki. And you know what I mean? People can come in and go, oh, what's this stuff? Oh, look, here's a whole bunch of terms that haven't been formally, you know, locked into the wiki. And I'm not saying that once they are, they don't change, but it just has that sort of staging ground page where people can just almost have a conversation within the wiki. Is that a bad idea?
It could be. Sorry, Michael, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, it sounds like a great safety page for you, Stefan, to get over the nerves you had about putting a term on. This is the great, but you know, you won't be the only one. I'm not a great contributor to Rookies myself, so I'll probably talk to Gavin on the phone and tell him to put it on my behalf if I.
I think that could be done for sure. But the other thing that I really liked from, and again, this was one of your suggestions last week, Stefan, or the last time we met, was this idea of having different levels of terms, so color coding terms. So saying this one's, you know, totally, you know, formally defined. We're happy with the definition as it stands. And other terms that are very much in flux, that maybe, you know, they're color coded red, for example, or something like this. That actually these are things that are brand new, that not fully well defined, and you know, that we need to work to try to lock them down.
Well, I was going to say, I think that it's useful even just to persist the discussion and the debate that we have over these terms. So I like the idea of having a parking lot page of, this is a loaded term, immersive audio. Let's go have a debate about it. And then as we start to peel out parts of that we have good definitions for, still being able to keep track of, well, here was the conversation that led to these definitions. And if we do quote directly from a book, to Stefan's suggestion, let's please cite the source that we used.
Awesome. I think the other thing is tracking the discussion in this way is really valuable, because it also gives us an idea of what are the more either interesting or controversial or whatever else you want to say areas. I think the things that gain the most heat are probably the things immediately we'll understand the most ambiguity, which is interesting in terms of the terminology, but it might give us a good indicator of where people's lack of understanding is, or feel there needs to be more. So if we find, like, in general categories around tool workflow, there is no terminology, it's pretty obvious that's a clear area that could probably do with some more general attention, not just about the wording, but why is the wording itself a problem. So I think the discussion is actually a really important part of the definition that we result in. So I think it's as much the journey as it is the destination in this case.
Yeah, and I think also one interesting thing that eventually you can try to do is to have almost like some kind of request for definition, where people could say, okay, I think that we should define this word, or should define that word, or someone that goes there and says, okay, I have seen this word coming a lot of times, but I'm not completely sure what it is, or I have seen different people using the same word for different things. So eventually some kind of request for definitions, I think it could be interesting.
That's a very good idea. And that's also kind of why the safe page, or whatever we want to call it, can be that, because if it becomes a bit of an open page that everybody can sort of land on, or it's one of the early ones, then yes, as has just been suggested, people can go, oh, I keep hearing this term, what does it mean? Or I read a different version of that term, should we update it, etc., etc. And it becomes and I think very much being a safe space from the point of view of and I think I would put this on the top of the page, that this page is a page in flux, and anybody should feel free to sort of ask any question. It's one of the biggest things that I've always been a huge advocate for with any of the discussions or lectures I've done or whatever. It's like, there is no such thing as a stupid question, because of course we're trying to educate people. But the other thing is that the number of times when I've had a student who's thought that they have no clue about anything ask a really innocent question, and I've just been blown away by, oh my God, I've never thought of it in that way. You've just opened a whole can of worms here that are really valuable, because you asked what you thought was a stupid question that is actually mind-blowingly insightful. And all us veterans who think we know what we're talking about have gone, oh, holy crap, we never even thought of it that way. Gold star over there, thank you, sort of thing. And so we really need to encourage people, the safe place of just go nuts, say anything, ask anything, show us that we don't know what we're talking about.
Right.
I think there's probably a lot of people using some fancy terms that they heard someone else use, and they get a lot of adoption, and perhaps nobody ever realized what they meant. We just use them because other people do. Maybe I'll flag some of those. This
is really important. And it's hard to do. I mean, especially somebody who wrote the book, right? I was having a brief talk with Sally the other day on Messenger, and she said, oh, I think one of the biggest things at the moment is externality. And initially I went, I don't know what she means by that word, and I'm going to feel like a complete idiot saying I don't know what you mean by that word because supposedly I'm an expert. But we've got to get over that. And so I just wrote back and said, Sally, can you define what you're using that term for? Because I have no idea what you actually mean. And she said, oh, well, the fact that things have always sound like they're inside your head. And I'm like, bam, I knew exactly what she was talking about. But we've got to get over this fear of looking like an idiot because we don't know, and it's a really, like, I'm old enough and ugly enough and comfortable enough in my own skin to basically go, sorry, I'm going to ask a dumb question. But a lot of people will be like, oh no, I've been working in this field. I'm supposed to know what that means. And so they don't ask. And so they go off continuing that ignorance because we don't feel comfortable basically showing, I don't know, vulnerability or lack of knowledge or something like that. And so it, with Sally, I was quite happy to go, what do you mean? I don't understand that term. And I did understand that term, but I just not ever used that word for that situation.
Don't feel bad. I have no problem being an idiot and admitting that I never heard that word before either. So there you have it.
Yeah.
So we might be the only two idiots in this room, but certainly not out there in the world. So
nope, Sally's making up words.
I missed what the critical word was.
Can we please make sure that that's marked very, very boldly in whoever's doing the minutes for this meeting? Sally's.
What was the word?
The externality. Yeah, I think it was externality. Now, I will point out, and I want to say this officially, Sally might be making up words, but she's really damn good at it. And when she does, it's kind of like, that's a real, and I walked away from that going, that's a really good word. That's my word of the week. I need to work on that one.
Well, it's also, she works for Microsoft, right? And it's like, well, you feel a little stupid arguing with somebody from Microsoft because they're all experts, right? Isn't that the idea?
This is the why Scott left.
Oh.
But this is the whole point. There are terms that are used differently, and I don't know about you, but we all have concepts in our head that we use every single day in audio production or design or whatever, and then somebody comes out with a word, and let's use the word externality, and it's kind of like, what do you mean by that? I mean X, Y, and Z, and it's like, oh wow, that's the thing that I've been using in my head for the last 6 months. But I never put a word to it because I never needed to. It was just because I was working within my head and I was doing this thing. And so somebody's voiced a word that has now solidified it. And that's super valuable. That I think a lot of the times all of us have been doing, Scott's been doing this thing and Linda's been doing this thing and Michael's been doing this thing, and they've all been doing the exact same thing. And they may have their own term for it, or they may not have no term at all. And then it's not until a discussion like this comes along that all of a sudden it's like, oh, wow, we've all been thinking about exactly the same thing without having a term for it. And that's where the wiki is going to be super valuable.
It will be handy. If nothing else, we could stop using our in-house dictionary. We have an in-house studio dictionary of all the crazy terms we come up with, because how do you describe that? I don't know. That sound is blue. Okay, we'll go with it today. So.
Exactly. Should say externality. Yes, high externality. Surely that's what blue is.
It's got to be. Well, I guess we actually have a dictionary of phrases by Charles Deanan, but that's another story for another day. So,
Is it
this
worth talking about some of the words on the wiki? Sorry, Gavin.
Sorry, I was just going to say. I mean, this idea of a landing page sounds like a really good thing to do. What I'll do is I'll have a look back and see what sort of integration we can have within the wiki. If it, at the basic level, we can have this sort of landing page, but maybe we can have something a little bit more, given that it is a Google wiki, so it might be something that we can do. So that'll be, I guess, an action on me to just see what sort of, I guess, social integration can go into this, so that we can create a pathway to definition for these different terms.
Are there examples of terminology dictionaries in the other technical committees of the AES that we could?
Yeah, the spatial audio.
So.
Actually, the spatial audio technical committee worked on one. I will.
Yeah.
Do you know where that is, Michael?
Take an action. I will
that...
find. Yes. Well, so they have a problem.
Terms we could just link to them.
Yes. What I realized as I said that there's a massive overlap between the two. So they have one, and it's on a private wiki. It's hosted on a private server, not because anyone's being secret about it, just because it's the most convenient place they could put it at the time until it evolved. So I actually have action items to support that wiki anyway. So let me chase that, and I'll talk with Gavin about it in the first instance, and then we'll find the right way to bring it forward into the light in some way, depending on the status of it. So let me double check on that offline.
Gavin, really stupid question, because I'm good at those. How do we find the wiki that you've started?
It's literally just invite only authoring at the moment. It's for this group to get together to create a skeletal framework. So if you want access, Linda, I can give you access, no problem. But it's literally for us to get something together, so that when people come along, they say, okay, this is the construction of it, I understand how it works, and now here I can make my contribution to it. So yeah, so right now it's not a public thing, it's just within the group itself. So so I can send that link out to you later.
I really appreciate it, thank you.
Yeah,
I've just made an action item for myself. I'm going to start to populate it because now that we've had this conversation, get over the fear, and I will literally just start with the really easy ones like the IID and ILD, because I can put those in, and then what I might do is just I don't know if we have a glossary page, but I might initially just do a glossary dump, because it's the whole point. Again, the wiki. We shouldn't be fearful of, we can't make the wiki public until it's perfect, because it'll never be perfect. And so even if the structure is a little bit hectic initially, and if I have a separate page that is literally just glossary dump, and then it's a whole bunch of terms, because then people can look at the glossary and go, yeah, okay, I'm going to take that term and I'm going to put it in the wiki, and I'm going to, because I know about that, and I'm going to branch out on it, etc., etc. So I'll at least get some stuff into the wiki, hopefully in the next week or so, just to sort of give it some life.
I think the situation with the New Realities wiki and the Spatial Audio wiki is they're certainly not intended to be exclusive in any way, or private or secret, or just for a small group to contribute to. I think the evolution of both of these things that they started, that I think people felt they wanted to put enough content on them to illustrate what the wiki was about before, rather than just launching a blank page. So I think they wanted to kind of set the tone. I think that's the idea, but I think it's down to this group.
But the risk of that is it never goes public, and then it never grows because we all get so busy. Whereas I think putting it out there, even if somebody comes along and puts in 10 terms and 8 of them are wrong, at least it's probably going to call the rest of us to action, because we look at it and go, oh, that one's wrong, I will update that. Whereas if the thing just sits there, and I mean, I know Sally built this, was it probably close to 12 months ago that the basic structure went up on it? And so what we've got is, I think we've got the skeletal structure of, half a dozen pages with their headings. They're all empty. So nothing's actually been done on it, because that sort of thing of like, we'd all love to do this, and we all understand that it's important, but we're also all really, really busy. And this is something that, very, very quickly will be deprioritized down our list if something else comes along. So
I think
so just to remind. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's within the gift of this group to decide when it should go live. So I think that's There's no definition of when it does. If tomorrow is the day in its current state, I think that's something this group can decide. But sorry, Gavin.
Well, no, just to remind the group that the idea was that this was something that we would launch at AES York next March. So that would be a formal output from the group, that we would have a populated wiki that we have all contributed to, and then we release it to the public, and then we just let it do its thing and let it breathe. But before we get to that point, the idea was that, as Michael had said, that we have something that shows how it all works, and that we kind of, I guess in a way, do a sort of testing on it first ourselves to make sure that everything is actually working and everything is doing things that it should be, like the landing page that we were talking about before for describing things. So so that was the goal, and the idea here was that we were going to have these monthly meetings up to AES York on the particular topics related to the wiki. So this here is terminology. The next one is going to be based on psychoacoustics. The next one's going to be based on spatial audio rendering, and so forth. And after each of these different meetings, that we're going to have concerted effort to populate those sections of the wiki with all of the particular experts in the field. So that's the kind of roadmap we want to get to with this, rather than just kind of throwing stuff out there in an uncontrolled way where people just go ahead and populate it. That we actually discuss things first and say, okay, this is how we want to focus on this particular aspect of the wiki. So in this case, focusing on the glossary of terms and how we approach that. And in the next meeting, then focusing on the psychoacoustics and how we approach that as well. So that's kind of the roadmap for this.
Gavin, how can one join those meetings, for folks that aren't in the UK?
Well, so yeah, so this is the challenge here. So this is why this is one of those meetings, Linda. So this is the meeting for the terminology, and we're trying to shuffle around the time zones, much to Stefan's.
The next one, somebody else is going to have to host, because the next one. So I'll explain this. So yeah, so Linda, the kind of what we came out of this, and I was the one who sort of pushed for this because of spending pretty much the first 12 months of being involved with this committee, and I wasn't at any of the meetings because I live in a small country town that's a little bit past Pluto. And so every time you guys, all you big city slickers, have all these important meetings in Seattle and London and stuff, I'm on the other side of the universe. And so I realized that it's not just me. And in fact, what's really, really important about this is that the last meeting we had, which was just before the AES that you organized, Linda.
The one that was really early in the morning, my time.
And so here's the thing: there are three time zones that we've written out. All right, and we are alternating between those three. So the first time zone one basically put the West Coast at 6 a.m. Now I am completely unapologetic for that, because literally the week after that, you were going to have the actual conference where everybody could be live. And what I wanted to do was I wanted that first meeting to be as open as possible to people all around the world. And one of the things that was very important that came out of that is the importance of that, because when I put on the Facebook and I put in all the different time zones, etc., somebody pinged me and sort of went, oh yeah, and here's the time zone for Palo Alto. And I went, very good point. I apologize for that. I didn't include anywhere in Latin America as a time zone. So I've since rectified that. So Latin America is now in there, because I had, London, Europe, Moscow, Delhi, across the world, but I didn't do Latin America. So I've rectified that. So what we have is, we have three time zones, which I can very roughly tell you just as an example. So on the three time zones, one of them for West Coast USA, one of them is the 6 a.m. for West Coast USA, one of them is for 12 noon West Coast USA, and one of them is for 2 o'clock in the afternoon West Coast USA. Now, whilst the 6 a.m. time might have been inconvenient for that one, Linda, it is actually the only time zone we have where everybody is on the exact same date. The other ones, it shifts across.
Yeah, 6 a.m. isn't a problem. I was just joking around. The reason why I couldn't make the last meeting at 6 a.m. is because I got sick and just couldn't even get out of bed.
No. I do understand that, but just as a general explanation, it is one of those things where, you know, that 6 a.m. one certainly would have been was certainly early for where you were, but by comparison, if somebody in Auckland or Wellington in New Zealand wanted to join that particular meeting, it's 1 a.m. for them. Now this next the next meeting that is scheduled will need to be using our second time slot option, which is the one that is 12 noon your time. I won't be hosting that one because that's 5 a.m. for me. So I'll have to explain to somebody else how to host that one. So that is a problem.
We can't just wake you up and get you out of bed at that time. You can always go back to sleep.
Do it from bed. Just lie there with your headphones on in bed.
Yeah. Well, but I mean,
I think the intent is that if we keep moving them around and we also make sure that they're broadcast, so people, I'm right, Stefan, people can go and watch this meeting
correct
afterwards, so they can at least see what happened if they couldn't participate. The meetings are open, so anyone who's watching this can ask Stefan for the link. Presuming people can do that in the right way from the YouTube feed. I don't know how that works. I've not seen it.
If they're watching the YouTube feed, they have the link. Probably what I should be doing, and I'm not sure that I did that last time, after we've actually done this, so after we shut down today, sometime later on today, I should actually take the link and share it across all those Facebook things going, hey, here's the video if you want to watch it, and there is a permanent archive of it. So if anybody at any point in time wants to watch this, they are archived on the Sound Librarian
and if people have the contact details to get the Hangout link from you as well, is there a way they can contact you to get that link?
Well, yes. Generally, what's happened is that today, just before we started, I sent an email to yourself and to Gavin. I then had personal messages from Linda and Scott sort of saying, how do I get in on this? And I sent them a thing. And then at the beginning, once you were all in here, I then shared it into the YouTube thing. But if somebody wants to specifically get in, yes, they can contact me, and I will send that out. As I said, the Google Hangout does have a limitation of 10 people in it. But if there's somebody who wants to be involved, all they have to do is ask.
What's the date of the next one? And
hasn't been established yet. I'll post it when we've got it.
Okay, great. And then
it'll be around a month's time, Linda. So we're trying to hit these at least a month now. So
okay, great.
That's going to have to be. Actually, no, that one will work. It's actually good that that's the one that I can't host because in about a month's time I'm going to be in Shanghai, so I don't know that I'd be in a position to do it anyway.
Yeah, in about a month's time, we're going to be all just coming back from AES New York, which ends on the 20th or so. Yeah. So I guess the next meeting will be about a week after AES New York.
And in fact, we could actually do something at AES New York as well, because
that was one of my questions, because that's an opportunity for some good crowdsourcing as well.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I know both Michael and I are at. Michael, you're at AES New York, right?
Yes,
Michael.
Sorry. Yes, I was nodding. Can you hear me nodding?
The thing about that is what would be really good is if you guys or anybody, you people, are going to have live meetings at these sorts of conferences, it would be really, really good for the rest of us, the rest of the world, if these things were captured somehow on a video or something like that, so they could also be archived, because I think
I will look into that. There are some difficulties around doing that we've had in the past, but I will look into it.
I do understand that, but it is one of the things, and I'm the perfect example in that I'm involved with this actual committee, and yet I also have the experience of being the person that's on the other side of the planet, sitting there going, well, I don't get to go to this conference because all of these conferences and what's going on, and that's one of the reasons why I've been running these ones that are online. But I think it's a little bit. I will say it comes across at times as being a little bit elitist. Oh, yes, we're having a meeting at the New York thing. It's like, well, sorry, guys, but not everybody gets to go to New York. And if we're wanting to be inclusive and global, we have to accept that.
Yeah. We'll try and sort that out. I think, again, if that does happen in New York, I guess the primary motivation is to capture the people who are in New York at the time, if we can. A good byproduct of that is to make this. But I think I would consider this the main meeting. So this online meeting that we're having, in its future iterations, is the meeting. If we happen to have it in New York and we have some difficulties, I mean, we can't broadcast it. I
if
think
you can't broadcast it, no.
Well,
Yeah, sorry. I wasn't saying necessarily you have to broadcast the meeting in New York. I mean, that would be ideal. But if you can't broadcast, at least just capture it so that it can be put up, so that people can watch that one as well. And so I mean, if somebody captures that video,
Understood.
I'm happy to then upload it onto my YouTube. And so we've got a running archive so that people can see the evolution of this. And it's whereas if all of a sudden we have the next meeting and everybody's going, right, so at the last one we talked about blah, and everybody's like, whoa, what blah? Where was that? And where was the detail of that? And you've made a decision about this, and I don't understand, and etc. Because then it just means that people are all of a sudden, it's kind of like missing a chapter in a book. Like, oh, I missed that bit, and all of a sudden, Michael's married to Voldemort, and when did that happen? I didn't see that coming. And
no, did I? This is definitely news to me too.
Congratulations.
So I was going to say thanks, Scott. I'll send you an invite if we have what do you call it when you have your second wedding? I don't know. Anyway, this has gone way off topic. Voldemort and all the rest. Gavin, trying to help bring it back from Voldemort. It might be helpful also if you posted that agenda, if there's a way to post that alongside the kind of YouTube link so that people can see what's coming up, and if they have the option to prioritize which meetings they would attend, that would be helpful to them as well.
Now,
But
Gavin, sorry. Gavin, do you have a list of agendas or a list of topics for the upcoming months so that people can take a look at that, both within the group and within the community at large, and say, oh, wow, in November or December, they're going to discuss this topic, and that looks great, and I really want to be tuned in for that.
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, we have a list of topics for sure, and it literally is going down each of the sections of the wiki. So there's nothing stopping us just, posting online saying, okay, we're going to do this, these different topics and these different months. The only thing really is just kind of setting the dates ahead of time. It can be a little bit tricky based on everybody's schedules. But we can kind of say with the intent that, November, we're going to talk about this, December, we'll talk about this. So yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, and to get, find a clean way to get that out into the public. So I know that only 10, I guess, Stefan, only 10 people can take part in the discussion itself, and the rest of the folks have to just kind of tune in and watch. But if we just let people know what the upcoming discussions that they can look forward to, then they can either ping Stefan and ask to take part in it, or they know at least where to go to watch and to kind of just tune in on what's being discussed. So
Linda, just to clarify that, I have on my second monitor here the YouTube stream, and it has a delay, and literally the delay is only about 10 seconds. It's not a big delay, right? And I'm sitting watching that, and there is a chat channel in there. So literally, if somebody who's watching the YouTube thing right now has a question to what you just said, they can type it in. So the YouTube thing is not live discussion like this, but it is live with a very minor delay, and they can ask questions at any point in time, and I will inject those questions. So they can contribute to the discussion to any extent that they want to. And I always say to them, you are very welcome. Please ask any questions you want to, et cetera, et cetera.
Great, good point. Then Gavin, what do you feel is the best way to get that schedule out to people? Just some type of notification that says, hey, coming up in the next 2 months, here's what's on the plate to discuss for the months of October, November, and December. I mean, even if we just send out like 2-3 months in advance, so people can plan, okay, I really want to be part of that, and I know that's coming down the pipeline in November. I want to keep an eye out for that. What's the best way, do you think, that we can get that word out to the public at large? I mean, posting in Facebook groups and whatnot. I mean, I know we're AES, and I've been an AES member since '84, but I have to tell you, I am the worst at actually using the AES page, forums, and I'm ashamed to admit that, but I just did.
No, don't be. I'm not myself either. No, I think trying to hit the Facebook forums, LinkedIn, Twitter, all of these different social media platforms. That's the way to do it. This is where people are lurking. So
and can we put it on the YouTube page as well? because then it's with the the meeting.
So just so people know, partially answering Linda's question, when we come up with a date, I've got a literally text file here where I write out the invitation. I work out all the time zones, et cetera, so that's known. And then I copy and paste that. Now, the last ones, to let you know some of them where they're going, I posted, these are all on Facebook. I posted the official AES Facebook group, the Spatial Audio and VR, AR and MR Facebook group, the Game Audio Denizens one, the Sound Design one, the VR, AR Audio one, the VR Audio one, the VRCC one, and then I also posted on LinkedIn. So basically...
what he said, basically
a bunch of Facebook groups and in LinkedIn, and so that's where I post the invitations with the YouTube link that we've got here. So I post that in all those groups. So if somebody gives me a schedule or whatever, I can post to those exact same groups.
Right, and that would be a great idea. It's just kind of a stay tuned coming up next month. You know, be prepared for this, because as all of us have known that especially those of us that have put together either a meeting or a conference or even just this, you can't just say, okay, this is happening next week, because people will read it once and then completely forget about it. You got to do like, okay, in 2 months, okay, in 30 days, okay, in 14 days, okay, tomorrow, the day after tomorrow, whatever. You have to just kind of constantly remind people, because everybody's so busy and has a million things going on. So it would just be really great if there is an understanding of what the next 3 months of topics will be, that those should go out as soon as possible. And then I believe in just absolutely bugging the crap out of people to get them to do things.
I agree with that in principle, Linda, but the problem with that bugging the crap out of people is that means that I need to basically be putting out a whole bunch of posts, every 3 or 4 days.
It doesn't.
As we come up to the last 10 minutes, is it worth talking about the terminology, or are we going to push that to another thing? Are we done with terminology, Gavin? I was aware you wanted to. I just realized we're talking about meeting arrangements and stuff.
I kind of guess we're slightly going a bit off topic here, but these are all really valid points, and for sure, I think being able to kind of advertise these meetings should be done quite a lot, and I think it's not just down to the responsibility of one person as well. So everybody within the group should be able to push the agenda to whoever they can. So take that forward. But the final thing that I want to say on this, the idea, and it was a great idea that Sally came up with, was that for each of these topics, that what we try to do is to have somebody who sort of champions these areas. So, for example, somebody who's quite, prominent within the group in psychoacoustics could lead that discussion with other psychoacoustic people and other, practitioners and technologists and so forth, to try to make that section of the wiki as cohesive and as current as possible. And then similarly, somebody who does content creation, somebody who works with production tools, all of these different topics would have somebody who champions these areas as leading that session. So we said Stefan was a good person actually to do this one, because of all the people that we know, he's probably the only one who has such a glossary of terms that we can throw into the wiki and start working from. So that's the idea here. We're trying to kind of get in the right people, to get in the experts in the field, to really showcase and to champion these different sections of the wiki, so we are getting the most up-to-date material for it. And I guess that's, by having these sort of star attractions, that we can make it, something that people really want to dial into. So,
well, I mean, the terminology thing for me is very important, just from the point of view of I really did get sick and tired of people making really wild claims, and the number of snake oil salesmen that have popped out of the woods with VR and AR and everything else like that, and literally people making really wild claims of like, oh, I'm an expert in blah blah blah, and you read one paragraph of what they've written and it's like, you haven't got a clue, and you're throwing around terms and you're getting them factually incorrect. And so at least by us making a wiki, once it's settled down a little bit and we agree on it and it gets a little bit of editing and cleaning up, we can at least kind of like bounce it back to, if there's a discussion that somebody's having on Facebook where they are making wild claims, we can at least kind of just drop in the link to the wiki and not even say anything and let it sort of do the work for us, because it does get frustrating. Like literally there was one discussion where somebody was making some wild claims and I just sort of subtly went, yeah, look, I'm not sure that you're absolutely clear on that. And this person just went off on a giant sort of like, oh, who do you think you are? And I've been doing this for ages and ages and ages. And somebody else jumped in and went, yeah, he wrote the book on it. And it was just kind of funny, but this person was like getting things really wrong. And I was just politely trying to say, no, look, I think, and this person was sort of acting as though they were the font of all knowledge for spatial audio. And they were just getting stuff greatly wrong, which was frustrating, because there are people who will listen to what they say and then go and act upon it incorrectly.
That's it. I mean, the number one thing that we have to do here is educate people, and it's not that we want to do this in any sort of patronizing way. We just want to say that, okay, here's work terminology, different topics that we have discussed and we have agreed upon in terms of how they should be presented and how they should be defined to the world. And if we don't do it, who's going to? So we have to educate people. That's the whole body of AES. It's the job of the AES to do that. So yeah.
Gavin, can you describe a little bit more about when somebody is going to champion a topic? What does that entail, champion? If you could just describe that a little bit more, that would be great.
Yeah, so Sally had this notion that within her job that she has these, I guess, internal, what's the word she used to describe it? Some like internal competitions, I guess, whereby. Say again?
She didn't make up a word for that?
Yeah.
I looked it up. It's a real word. Don't worry about it.
Okay, good.
And so within it, they have these teams of people, and they're all working on different projects, and the teams have different experts leading the projects, and so the idea is that you have one person who sort of sponsors the whole thing, who kind of says, okay, I'm going to facilitate this, in our case, facilitate this meeting by inviting people who I know are prominent in the field and are experts in the field. So let's say if it was something like binaural audio, so if it was HRTFs, people who have, measured HRTFs, who have worked with binaural sound for quite some time. Those would be the people that we could bring in and utilize to populate the wiki. Yeah, and to discuss terms and to bring them in and expand the knowledge of this group, essentially. So that's the notion here, and that we, as a technical committee, can kind of facilitate that to happen and allow them to use this as a forum to get the expert knowledge into a place that people can be educated with.
Right.
So that's the idea.
Okay. It makes a lot of sense, so that it's not just the Wild West where everybody's just writing in and bombarding the wiki with ideas, that it's broken down into, kind of smaller digestible chunks. I was just curious as to, how one gets assigned to a certain area, and then their job, basically, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, is to go out, identify the experts in that area, and to start collecting words and knowledge and definitions from those people, and then funneling that back to the wiki. Then, is that correct?
That's basically the idea. Yeah. But to have open meetings like this that are recorded and that are discussed, where people can go and review and debate the terminology, debate the articles that are going to be put in the wiki or whatever, so it's all very transparent and open.
Right.
But we need it to be with the experts in that particular application area.
Gavin, just to think about the kind of end result, are we looking for a set of definitive definitions, or is it okay to leave ambiguity in some of them? For example, if there is disagreement about something, maybe you've got two spheres that are using the same term differently, is it okay for us to document that and say there is ambiguity here, these are the two meanings of it, and not set one as definitive? Or are we also trying to set forward the AES definitions of these terms? Or the
I think
AES
it's down to us as a group to decide whether there's ambiguity or not. And if there is ambiguity, then we say that.
Right.
I think that's really it. I mean, ultimately, you know, the terminology can change so rapidly, so fast. You know, that what we might think is has ambiguity now may not in 6 months' time. You know, as you know, was pointed out earlier on, you know, we can have these definitions that really are in widespread use. You know,
I think I think it's far more important for us to actually cite different uses and ambiguity than it is to try and lock anything down. I mean, language changes all the time anyway, and with technology, it changes at a ridiculous rate. I mean, you've just finished typing in a definition, you hit submit, and somebody else has already come up with another idea. So I think it's probably far more valuable to ourselves and to everybody else to give as much information as possible. So if we come up with term X and Microsoft use it this way and Sony use it that way and Oculus use it that way, as long as we say to people, hey, we've found that there are 3 major organizations and they're all major stakeholders in this particular field and they're all using it in slightly different ways, I think that's actually far, far, far more valuable than trying to lock anything down. Because then people can look at it and go, that makes far more sense now because I saw it in that paragraph over there, but I saw it in that article over there, and that would seem to contradict each other. And now that I know that it's used in different ways, I think that is as useful information has far more value than trying to say, well, we're defining it as X. I don't think that particularly helps anybody, but for us to try and say that we're trying to lock it down, I don't think there's value in that.
It's going to be a kind of a tricky area to navigate, Stefan, because I don't know how many times I've been in discussions with people where I've had people argue that stereo is spatial audio. Well, okay, technically it is when you look at it from this angle. And then people are like, well, 5.1, 7.1, 22.2 spatial audio. Atmos is spatial audio. And, to spatialize something, well, if I take mono and I make it stereo, I've spatialized it. And it's just like, oh my God, we have our work cut out for us.
We absolutely do. And I've been doing this for years because I've spent a lot of my time creating training videos to try and introduce film and television linear-based people into game sort of stuff, where I basically have to try and explain to them the difference between surround sound, which is channel-based audio, as against object-based audio, which is 3D. Because I've had people who work in Hollywood go, oh no, we've got 3D. Look, there's speakers all around the room. I'm like, no, you're doing channel-based panning as against object-based sort of 3D stuff, you know, a 3D game. And like I've had all sorts of conversations exactly like what you've just described. We can only do what we can do.
Right.
I think defining channel-based and object-based might be a good starting point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here's where context is everything. You know, we have to think about these definitions in context of what this group is focusing on, because even the spatial audio group within AES, they deal with spatial audio. Yes, they do, and so do we. But the context between this group for new realities and just flat out spatial audio, the context is slightly different, right? Because things like everything from Amazonic to 5.1 are covered in the spatial audio group. But here in the new realities, would we even consider 5.1? You know, so it's really, we have to look at these definitions in a contextual standpoint, from a contextual standpoint of what this group is trying to aim at.
I think
that's a really important point. Actually.
Yeah, no, I think Linda's got a really important point there. Sorry to cut you off, Michael. I think that, do we need to perhaps approach the wiki in a slightly different way? Like, wikis are often just a definition, you know, shoe, an object that you put on your foot to clothe the foot, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe our wiki needs a different approach from the point of view of, we have a word, we have a definition, and then we have a contextual example, so that we're basically saying to the person, not only this is the word and this is how we define it, but this is what we mean by that definition. Here's an example of what we mean by that, so that if somebody else looks at it, goes, oh, well, I'm using it in a different way, then we could literally have, well, here's a second definition and the second context for it. That might make the wiki far more valuable.
I think
By the way. So apologies if I have to duck out quickly.
Thanks
No
for
worries.
joining.
I think that's a important approach at a detailed level. I think Linda points out a really important aspect of the bigger picture, and the one that kind of clouded my mind when we were talking about the spatial audio wiki is actually, even if you look at film and games, for example, similar techniques, similar technologies, completely different usage of terminologies. And I think that's a really important point for this group to focus on. And when we're writing this wiki, we're writing it in the application area of new realities or extended realities or augmented realities or this kind of broad group, where we're not actually trying to define the scientific field of spatial audio. Where we report ILD, we might be reporting as it's commonly used in this context, which I think if you go back to textbooks written in 1969, you might have a different definition. So I think we will encounter a lot of terminology, and I've already seen them on the wiki, where they overlap really with other people's fields. And in new realities, it's not all about spatial audio. There are other things we need to worry about to do with audio as well. A lot to do with synthesis in augmented reality and environmental modeling. You know, we're very binaural and 5.1 focused, but there are a lot of other areas, and we'll find that actually none of these are exclusive, or very few of them are exclusive to new realities. So I think the most important thing we can do is what Linda says, and keep that context in our minds in every description we write.
I mean,
sorry,
go
ahead.
We have to keep in mind, why are we doing this? Why do we want this common dictionary? Why do we want this common language that we're hoping to put up on this wiki? And for me, I would think that the reason why we're doing this is to not only educate, but to avoid confusion amongst the clients, the content creators, just across the board, because I'm sure you guys have seen this. We're certainly seeing this coming out of our studio, where a client is like, yes, I hired this other guy. You need to clean up the tracks. I hired this other guy, and he put together a spatial audio for my picture. And then we get a hold of it, and we're like, I'm sorry, but 5.1, is not spatial audio. But the client was confused, going, well, hey, I thought this was spatial, or somebody else is doing Atmos. And there's a lot of confusion out there. And that kind of leads back to a little bit of what Stefan was talking about with snake oil salesmen. It's just that people are selling spatial audio, and it's when a purist, like folks that have been working in VR for 4 or 5 years, listen to it, we're like, that's not spatial audio, So I think there's an educational aspect to this dictionary, and there's just also kind of the just to get things clear, to cut away at some of the confusion.
I want to comment on Linda's point there, because Linda, the previous meeting that we had, Gary Taylor joined us. Gary Taylor is audio director at Sony in UK, and he was actually in with the team that created the PlayStation VR. And part of the reason why these meetings have been really important for me is because one of the consequences of when I went to GDC this year, and I talked to a whole bunch of people, like literally most of the top people in VR sort of stuff at that stage, and Gary was a perfect example of, like, our discussion started with, oh, so have you got any examples of good spatial audio for VR? And everybody I talked to was like, nah, it's really bloody awful. And it's exactly what you were talking about, in that we've got all of these people, and seriously, I've been pulling my hair out over this, because I have been looking at teams of people who have been working on huge profile projects, and I'm not going to name any of them, but really, really big IP VR experiences. And I'm sorry, but the audio has been bloody awful. It has been barely stereo. Really big AAA titles where literally there's things like stereo rain. You turn your head and the rain follows your head. And I'm like, what the bloody hell are you people doing? And I think part of our thing is not just to educate, say, some of the young up and coming people who might want to get into this field, but it's really important for us to start educating some of the studios who are frankly being ripped off by throwing large amounts of money at Hollywood Studio X, who promise they're going to do some awesome thing, and their really big IP title has really terrible audio, because that is going to kill all of us. Because if as far as this industry getting anywhere and VR being adopted, every single one of those subpar experiences that gets through loses us another audience member, because the audience put it on and go, oh, well, this is boring. Well, this is terrible.
It lowers the bar. It lowers the bar for all of us, because what happens is you get a client out there that's constantly being sold, half-ass stereo, 5.1 crash to stereo, and this guy was able to do the tracks for $1,000. Then the client walks away thinking, "Oh, job done. This is what mixed reality audio is about." So, not to get too far off field again, as we approach the wiki, we need to take a look at, kind of keep the end goal in sight. And what is the end goal? Is it just to become the Webster's dictionary of audio for mixed reality, or are we trying to not only educate, but to also clarify for everybody, from the client, through the content creators, through the manufacturers, this is the accepted definition in this context, in this industry, for this particular term. So
I think that's, sorry, Nuno, you go ahead.
No, I essentially was thinking about all of these topics that we have been talking, and I think that eventually there are some words that we should try to avoid bringing into a discussion about our context, because I think I'm seeing several words that eventually, first of all, it's going to be quite hard for us to define them. It's words that are being used by many other people in audio for other things, and sometimes it could be also important for us to try to think a little more and eventually say, okay, eventually try to avoid that concept, that term, or that word, or something like that, because sometimes there are some words that it would be better if we don't use that words at all in terms of these definitions, because otherwise trying to define them, it's going to be quite hard, and it would be almost eventually better in terms of clarity to say, okay, let's try to avoid this word, because that word is too diffuse, too complex, too undefined. So eventually it could be interesting for us to also think about terms that eventually we as a community should try to avoid in the contest.
Good point. That's a very
agreed.
Agreed.
Yeah. Just want to go back as well to Linda's point.
I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go soon as well. I just want to say, the thinking about this in terms of the audience as well is really, really important. Particularly when we relay the definitions of things. So, for example, we could have one of the terms could be spherical harmonics, right? And so we all know that's related to ambisonics and so forth. We could lay out like this really highly technical definition for this, right? And that would be absolutely perfectly correct. But if you're a content creator, if you're coming to this stuff for the first time, you'd be like, what the hell is this stuff? Yeah. So we need to think about this for different levels of people who come to this, the complete beginner through to the absolute experts, and how we're going to deal with that, those different levels. So we kind of start off with a kind of basic overview or top level view of what that terminology means, and then we can, as a technical committee, go into the more nitty-gritty detail if we so choose. So I think that's just something to bear in mind in all of this, is the audience.
What we could do is work towards, and obviously we wouldn't name it that way, but we work towards, once the wiki gets to a certain point, we could actually look towards creating I guess almost a beginner's or a dummy's guide to this sort of stuff that is designed as the AES now presents this starters thing, and it's designed specifically for producers directors, designers, and it literally is just, we have given you, this is something that we've settled on, and here's a list of some terms, and it's only like one page, but here's a list of some terms broken down and a really, really plain English kind of explanation, and we present that as, here is our gift to you to help you avoid the snake oil salesman. This is exactly designed to help you get the absolute best. And if you have somebody come in and they're talking about stuff and it seems like it doesn't have anything to do with this, then perhaps you need to be asking them some careful questions, because and we invite them to look at the wiki if they want more detailed things. But we basically put together a cheat sheet that industry can use to basically go, you know what, according to my cheat sheet, it sounds like you're talking a load of rubbish. Bye. For instance.
Right. Well, that's, that you've just basically outlined the typical first chapter of any standard. It usually, most standards either kick off or at the very end have a glossary of terms so that anybody reading the standard can now speak a common language. Yeah. And really, when you talk about a technical committee for, I'm a member of SMPTE as well, really, that's what you're pushing ultimately towards, is to create some type of standard. And the standard always starts with a language. And so this idea of coming up with a glossary of terms for end users, you're starting to now think in terms of your first chapter for an AES standard in this area. Granted, every time you bring up AES standard, a standard for VR, everybody just kind of laughs and goes, "Oh yeah, great." When the dust settles and we figure out what the hell we're all doing, then we can do a standard. Yes, granted, I totally agree with that. But the wiki, that's kind of where I envision the wiki going, is that the wiki starts to pave the way towards a standard, and as that is usually one of the anchor chapters of any standards is a common language. So you've just described it, Stefan.
Great. I didn't mean to do that, but I'm very happy that I did. I think what I'm suggesting, Linda, is that that's a really good goal. That first page is a really good goal, because that's obviously the first step towards a standard. But your term of, everybody's waiting for the dust to settle. Well, maybe we're going to try and facilitate settling the dust a little bit.
Yeah. So we're getting there. I mean, everybody still is using the term Wild West. I just sat through, with the last AES conference, I just sat through another group of people going, it's the Wild West, and we're all just kind of, putting this together with Band-Aids and chewing gum. And it's like, yeah, but the players are starting to rise, and certain players have dropped out of the game altogether. You look at Dolby, Atmos, they stopped developing Atmos for VR, which kind of was a little bit heartbreaking because it was such a great tool set. Oculus, oh God, out of Finland, my brain just went totally right. Ozo is gone. Ozo. So you look at, some of the players are now starting to drop out, where some of the main players are now starting to move forward. And yes, I believe that probably with this kind of common language dictionary that we're really setting out to create, we're going to start seeing the ability to shape the infancy of a standard probably within the next year or two. So are we going to be able to just have, like, here's the 300-page AES standard for all things audio for mixed reality? Absolutely not, unless we develop time travel, and that probably won't happen. So,
but what we can do, Linda, is
this can be a start.
We can give you a sheriff's badge, and we can send you out into the Wild West, and you can start actually, getting some of the rowdy neighborhood a little bit quieter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. Like what you say is the total intent of this, that as we progress through the development of this wiki, that these different working groups and different champions look through this material and kind of say, actually, you know what, there's commonalities here in all of these different sections, in the different tools, in the different back-end rendering engines and so forth. And actually, then we start to see these threads that could potentially be pulled on for standardization. And then we have the other issue, and this is a topic for another day, and it was part of the discussion in the last meeting, was how do you assess the standard? But that's a topic for another meeting. So listen, guys, I think we might need to start wrapping up here. But I think what would be great now would be, Stefan, you have this wonderful list of terms. Would you be okay with dumping that into the wiki, and then we can go through things and maybe just start, you know, augmenting and changing, and or saying actually Stefan was on the mark?
Yeah, I'm happy to start spending some time in populating the wiki. But yes, I think my request would be, if people could help me once, and I'll you know, we can notify people once we started doing that. But if people could help me by basically looking, once I've started putting things in and going, oh, yep, let's edit that, let's add to that, let's delete that, let's tick off on that. Because again, I'm happy to spend some time populating the wiki, but it's completely pointless if I'm working in a void.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So sorry, Linda.
I was just saying, we're with you, Stefan. So we're not going to let you march through this alone. Don't worry.
Thank you.
So, okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, Stefan. That's awesome. So what I'll do after this then, for those of you who are here, I will share the wiki out to you guys, so that when Stefan has made his input into that, then we can have a look through, and we can go through that, and also add in our own terms that we think should be there as well, and discuss them and go through them in a bit more detail.
Gavin, can you send me the potential topics for the next few meetings? Because what I can do is GameSoundCon is coming up here in a couple of weeks, and Sally and I, as you know, are co-chairing the VR tract of that, and I can start kind of pimping these meetings. Sorry, pimping, very LA term. I can start pimping. I can start pimping these meetings at GameSoundCon. Brian Schmidt has absolutely no problem with us, you know, kind of cross-cultivating between the two organizations. And I can let people know, hey, this is coming up, and we're going to be doing this once a month. Stay tuned for the date, but the upcoming topics will include X, Y, and Z. And I'm happy to start spreading that word. And Stefan, I'm more than happy to share the burden of getting this out onto the various Facebook and LinkedIn group, because I believe that we're both members of pretty much all the same groups. So
yeah, probably one of us is stalking the other one. I'm not sure which, but that helps.
So I have no problem helping with that task, because you know I'm constantly on a one Facebook group or another, pimping some conference that I'm involved with, or some meeting, or I don't know, martini party for the week, whatever. So
and that is the thing, and Linda, that is invaluable, because I try to do as much as I can, but there really is, and it's one of the things that I'm noticing that I'm getting very close to having to do something about, that not being on the West Coast is proving now to be a significant handicap to me, from the point of view of the influence that I can have, the contribution I can do for good or ill. You know, it's very, very hard being, like, I love living with trees just outside the window, but I'm quite isolated from the point of view of being able to rally the troops or spruik the events or influence people's decisions and stuff like that. So, you know, having somebody who is, especially being in LA, you're going to be able to be far more influential on this than I am.
And I'm a consultant, which means I don't have a real job. So I actually have time. I have time for this. Don't tell my clients I said that. But actually, you know, oddly enough, as a consultant, you do end up with these pockets of time. And this is what I do during those pockets of time, is I go out and I organize things and I facilitate things. So again, don't ever hesitate, anybody on this group, don't ever hesitate to come to me and say, Linda, I'm absolutely buried in my teaching schedule. I'm buried with my clients. Can you take this on? And I'll look at my schedule and go, well, my phone's not ringing today. Sure, I'll take it. No worries. So yep. I'm a busybody.
Awesome.
Party.
Awesome.
Yeah, much appreciate the sentiment and the offer of support, and we'll definitely take you up on it.
No worries.
So at the very least, I think we can do a meetup at AES New York, and then potentially, if we can schedule something, then maybe for the following week afterwards. So I guess Stefan, we can chat offline and see what works for you. And
we are going to have to organize somebody else. That whenever we do that
Yeah.
third time slot, we're going to have somebody else pick up the load on that one. So I can do 2 out of the 3 time slots. So if we're cycling through those, I can do 2 out of 3. But the one that's at 5 a.m., there's a really good chance that I will just not, like literally you could drop a bomb next to me and wake me up, and that will not work. So,
but yet you expected me to be up at 6 a.m.
No, you wanted to be up at 6 a.m. and I was up. No. 6 a.m. is quite different than the meeting starting at 5 o'clock means that I need to be up at 4 a.m. So, but yeah.
Okay, so guys, I'm gonna head from here. So see some of you at AES New York and see others very, very soon. Okay.
Thank you very much for everybody.
Thanks a lot. Cheers. Bye-bye.
All
All right. Take care, everyone.